Welcome to the Marketing Share, everyone. Thanks for joining us back again at our show. I'm Alec, and I'm here with Barb, my co-host.
Hey.
Hello. Barb, not every time, most of the time when we have guests, we have a lot of guests that are experts in a particular field in marketing and always provide some really good insights. At least that's what we were trying to do, right? We're trying to provide kind of some deep expertise so you can quickly learn about an area that you might feel like you want to sharpen your skills on. But our guest today is of a different nature, more of a big picture look at marketing. And I think that's going to be a nice switch up and also a really valuable thing for our listeners to hear about. Can you tell them about who we've got today?
Yeah, I'm excited. We have Drew Neisser with us today. And Drew is another community leader, right? So we've actually had a few community leaders on, but he's the founder of CMO Huddles, and it's a B2B marketing leadership community. And they're united around all the shared goals that we have for marketing, especially the challenges that many CMOs are facing today, right? I mean, from growth pressures to shifting C-suite dynamics to tech overload and to all the things that are expected of today's CMO. You know, it's kind of a tough space to be in right now. As he says, it's the loneliest or the coldest place in the C-suite. I've heard him say that.
Yeah.
But he's also the author of Renegade Marketing, CMO's Periodic Table, and he hosts the Renegade Marketers Unite podcast. So I'm excited to get into his expertise and let's learn what he's got to offer because he's talked to a lot of CMOs.
He has. And I think the cool thing is that he's really being frank about the fact that it is a tough time right now for CMOs. So if you've ever felt like, right, I'm talking to our audience right now, if you've ever felt like as a head of marketing that you're in this alone, you're not. Drew's going to tell you about that. So let's go interview.
Hey, Alec.
Hey, Barb.
I'm super psyched. We're here with Drew Neisser today from CMO Huddles, and he's going to share a lot of insights around what CMOs are thinking about today. And, you know, you and I are thinking about a lot of things, that's for sure, but many have a lot of things in their minds today.
Yeah.
So welcome, Drew.
Hey, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you, Barb, Alec. Thank you so much for doing the show. I know how much work it is, so I appreciate being here.
Hey, it's a passion project for us, for sure, right? Well, tell us a little bit about how you started CMO. Give us just a brief snapshot on your career journey. And I would love to hear about your brand signature penguin, because I always see you in the penguin paraphernalia.
Yes. Well, let me answer that one first. So a group of penguins is a huddle. And that was an epiphany that I discovered when I was in the Galapagos. And the naturalist said, anybody know what a group of penguins is called? And literally, the guy says, the answer was a huddle. And I am on a ship in the Galapagos. And I texted the art director who designed our logo and I said, figure out how to get penguins in our logo. We're changing the brand. And
that's awesome.
Oh, and there's one other thing that is such an amazing story I have to share, and then we can go to the other thing. So, and I'm going to ask you this question. So 6,000 emperor penguins get together in the Antarctica, they huddle. Guess what the differential temperature from the outside to the inside is? Just take a wild guess in degrees.
I say it's about 10 to 20 degrees higher.
Yeah, I was going to say 15.
Okay. 70 degrees. Like
no way.
That's mind-boggling. And so you think about it, that this 6,000 folks working together to keep everybody warm, and they rotate and they have a way of dealing with this. And if you think about CMOs right now, this is the coldest job in the C-suite. So let's bring them in from the cold. So anyway, it's a wonderful metaphor. We've had a lot of fun with it. And we also donate.
I don't know if that says that there's a lot of hot air in the middle of the huddle, or if it really is the collective energy that's together.
No, come on, Barb. Don't go there.
But just so you know, we are not animal appropriators. We donate 1% of revenue to the Global Penguin Society. So,
nice.
So bring it. Come on. Let's do some penguin stuff.
I love it.
I love it.
Okay. So back to the story of how it started.
Yeah, just a quick recap for us.
Okay. So I have to go back 18 years. A friend of mine, Pete Kranick, who was a client, we ran an agency at the time, said, "Hey, Drew, I'm starting this thing called the CMO Club. Can you help?" We designed the logo. We designed the first website. And I became involved in this organization. And as a way of having a role, because I was a vendor, I started interviewing CMOs. Fast forward 18 years, March 2nd, 2020, Pete Kranick sells for cash the CMO Club to Salesforce. Literally the next day, the light bulbs go off and say, okay, that's not going to work. This is pre-pandemic by 2 weeks. It's not going to work. And then, of course, when the pandemic hits, I know it's not going to work because it was based on in-person meetings.
Oh, wow.
April 1st, 2020, I called up 20 of the CMOs that I knew really well, all B2B, and said, hey, let's huddle. Let's meet. We met 55 times in a 6-month period because you remember that was crazy. How do you do work from home? How do you, then Black Lives Matter. There was a lot going on. So by October 1st, we had a business.
Wow.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Really exciting.
That's a really cool story, actually. It went from the agency, but then you didn't even know it at the time, but you were about to have this, unheard of opportunity.
Yeah, no, it was so exciting. And what was great was that these initial 20 huddlers sort of said, okay, there's a business here. Here's the business model. Here's how much you should charge. Here's sort of the structure of the thing. And, most of those folks 5 years later are still members, which is
wow, that's
amazing.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I started in the agency business as well. And I think that's actually pretty remarkable to become the actual person in the CMO huddle from, an outside perspective on that. I think that's a testament to how you interact.
Well, I will say that it helped that by the time I started CMO Huddles, I'd already interviewed 400 or 500 CMOs for articles. And I had been running the B2B curriculum for the CMO Club for like the last 4 years at their summits. So it wasn't a huge leap for me to do this. And now I get to be the guy who sits in the middle of conversations, like we had one last night, where I'm just asking questions. Like you guys doing on a podcast. But I get to do that. And from podcast work and other things, how much you learn in every one of those conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so then the big question to lead with then, thank you for the background, is so you've spent years talking to probably by now thousands of CMOs, right? What's going on these days? What are you hearing right now? What's it like for CMOs? I think our audience would love to hear that big picture perspective.
To call this a perfect storm would be trite. It is without question. And again, I've been talking and interviewing CMOs, the hardest, for a lot of important reasons to be a B2B CMO in particular right now. You have just massive tech transformation and an expectation that you can do, with 20% of the staff, what you did before. And you also have AI within that tech transformation that is impossible to keep up with. So you have this sense of, I should know all this stuff, and it's impossible. Nobody can. And then you continue to have CEOs who less than 20% have ever spent a day in marketing. So you have complete ignorance, and you have an expectation that a CMO can come in and in 3 months transform the business. Like, who can do that? I mean, that's sort of that they have these magic wands. And that expectation issue has been the same for 10 years, but with AI, it's accelerated. You have a lot of PE-backed firms, which makes it even worse. And so the outcome of this, and there's some good news in all of this because it's a really exciting time to be a CMO, but I know a lot of CMOs who are really good at what they're doing saying, I've had enough. I'm walking away from the role. And that depresses me.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I mean, remember, I'm still a believer. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I'm still a believer that you should be able to have an impactful career and also have fun at it. Gosh, what about having fun at your work, right? But I do see it as well, right? I see a lot of what you're saying. So we all hear about the CMO as a result of what you just mentioned, the CMO having kind of the shortest tenure in the C-suite. We've heard that a million times. And what I hear you say is, this all comes from a lot of maybe unrealistic expectations from the C-suite. So this has to, come on. It's causing a crisis of confidence, right? Among some CEOs, perhaps.
Right.
And maybe even if it's not among the CEO, it's among the C-suite, it's among boards. And there's this skepticism out there about how much the CMO can contribute sometimes. So how are they dealing with this?
Well, it's funny. I was talking to a CMO last night who said that the CEO on day one said, I don't really believe in marketing. The CFO said that,
Oh,
right?
boy.
The person who controls the purse string. So, and it was interesting to hear how the CMO sort of dealt with that and, worked to build credibility and got to know them and how they look at the business and explain finance and all those good things. So it has never been an easy job. But I think, and this is a theory that I cannot prove, but I do believe seems to happen, is all the data and all the emphasis on demand generation has only made it worse, not better. Because if you want to be seen as a leader of the organization, you need to drive strategy and business impact. And if you are driving strategy and impact, it is not about counting leads and pipe necessarily. It is about transforming the organization so you have a better go-to-market. Well, go-to-market makes up marketing and sales and customer success and service, right? It's all four of those things. And so most of the time when a business stalls, it's not a marketing problem, it's a business problem. So if you say that we're going to solve this by creating a better engine, a demand gen engine, you're probably going to have some problems doing that. And then let's just compound that because the CMO, if they get a year in some cases, and it's a 18-month sales cycle, what's happening is each CMO comes in, they're dealing with what that other CMO did in 12 months or 14 months or 16 months, which is finally having an impact. And then they're changing it all. So when you see companies who've had 3 CMOs in 4 years or something, the problem is frankly with the CEO and the board.
Yeah, it's a red flag, isn't it?
It is. It's a real problem. So it's a weird situation. The data hasn't necessarily helped marketers the way we all thought and hoped it would.
Yeah.
Drew, how long do you think this has been happening? Like, did you start seeing this shifting this way from, 5 years ago? Is it accelerated? Like you mentioned AI.
Right.
Has AI just really accelerated that even more? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Just like the latest trends and how it's the evolution that's taking place.
It is a trend that probably started 10 years ago, at least, and it's just accelerated. And let's face it, when in 2022, the market was really good. All the boats were getting lifted. And so you didn't really have, those were kind of good times for a lot of brands, even though the same trends were happening. The minute you have external forces like what's the uncertainty the tariffs have caused, you have a slowdown of positivity, which the CFO becomes the CFO, and this is on your buyer side. And so suddenly you have to go back to recession playbooks. You have to change the way the company thinks about its go-to-market. And a lot of companies haven't adjusted to the current economic situation. And again, blaming marketing when it's a macro issue. So, it's a macro issue, but marketing can't solve it. So let's switch this for a second and say, why is this the most exciting time to be a CMO? Because I think it is. There are a number of CMOs, I'm not going to say it's a majority, that are driving the AI implementations of the company. You say, wow, that's crazy. How is that happening? Well, they were spending more on tech anyway. AI was coming to them through their MarTech stack already. They were the first ones to use it for content and realize, oh, wait, there's other bigger problems that we could solve. And there's organizational opportunity here. So I like the CMO at KPMG North America. She's driving the AI initiative at KPMG. amazing. And I know another number, and those CMOs are seen as business leaders, not marketing tacticians. And that's this real important thing. I mean, it is chief marketing officer.
So let me ask you this. First of all, that's a lot to unpack. And, first of all, AI for sure. We're going to get there. Absolutely. What you said is this synergy, and I guess I've been in a company in that position since 2000. So I'm really used to, huddling with my brothers and sisters on the C-suite and not being necessarily the person in the marketing tactician seat, but how are we going to move this business forward, right? As a member of that team. So I've always kind of been that space, but a lot of people struggle with that, right? There's been this like hierarchy of, and the marketing's down there and the CFO's up here. So in my experience, these leadership teams, driving trust, alignment, and influence is the biggest job almost, right? And none of those things, as you can see, are acquisition
No.
and retention and many of the practices that many marketers have. So you think the best way that CMOs are doing this today is by leading in the front with AI? Is there any other ways that they're
There's lots of
navigating?
ways. Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for bringing that up. So we, in Huddles, we talk about this notion of CMO plus. What is your plus? What is that other area that gives you business credibility? And so a number of members of our community, for example, are chief marketing and chief customer experience officer.
Yeah.
Great, right? And it's great for a lot of reasons because now the conversation is so much broader than what's the pipeline look like.
Yeah. I've often said, you can't grow, exponentially grow your way with just operational skill set, right? Operational skill set's exciting, but, it's usually incremental wins. Whereas when you combine, more of a whole company effort, and when you think about the entire end-to-end experience for customers, you can probably plus up the business a lot quicker and more in a more robust fashion, I think.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we divide the world into PE and non-PE
Ah,
because I do think that it's a different experience. And I've been really hard on PE-backed companies for a year, and I've written a lot of rants about them, and some of them have gone viral. And now I've started to talk to more PE people to sort of try to get a balanced perspective on it. It's very hard. And the reason is they are looking at the data and they're forcing. And so if you work at a PE firm, you really do, you earn your credibility first by showing that you understand how to drive pipe. And I don't think there's any way around that.
oh no.
And so if you look at the pipe as it currently is, and if you know how to tweak it here, and you can get 5%, 10%, 15% more yield out of whatever it is that you were doing before, then you then have permission to actually do the job.
That's interesting. So you have to prove yourself operationally that you can drive top of the funnel, lower the funnel, pipeline, et cetera. And then you have permission to do other things. That's interesting.
Right. But if you're not at a PE firm, the CEO is probably leaning on the CMO to say, if they don't have a chief strategy officer, they're leaning on it and say, our customers better in theory than anybody else, and you should. And you have a perspective and you think long term, because short term was yesterday's news. It's, all the revenue and pipe, those are lagging indicators of whether or not you've transformed a company, right? I mean, just think about analyst relationships. That's a way that you can transform a business. You move it up a quadrant. That takes 18 months, 12 months, 18 months, right? So if a CMO has a year, they're not going to do that. They're not going to bother. And so the big transformative things take time.
Mm.
So how do you either are working with a CEO at a non-PE firm who will give you that time, say, here's where I want it. This is my vision for the company. This is where we want to be. Help me get there. And then it translates that into employee comms, in terms of customer comms, and then prospect comms. And so marketing should be all channels, not just acquisition. And this is the challenge that, at PE firms, it's net new, net new, net new.
Let me ask you about that a little bit more, because I think it's really insightful that you call out this distinction. First of all, I don't know the trends on this, but have PE firms become more prevalent? Like, is the ownership of companies increasingly shifting to PE, and therefore their influence on the CMO role is becoming bigger? I don't know if you've looked at any data like that.
I wish I had the exact data on this. I can look at our community, and because we're heavily tech, heavily SaaS.
Yeah.
If it wouldn't surprise me if it was 50% or more PE backed.
Yeah. Honestly, I think of them all in the same bucket, right? In terms of, VC, private equity, and of course your boards. Everyone's more data driven. And when we all introduced demand gen engines, they were like, great, finally we can put an ROI to this crazy thing called marketing.
Right. Yep. And by the way, VCs there's some similarities and differences, but usually VCs are earlier stage. They're trying to do proof of concept. They're trying to find product market fit. And it's not rule of 40, 25% growth and 15% EBITDA. They'll take growth.
Yeah, that's true. But, usually it's like they're expecting marketing to deliver the leads for even at young stages, right?
Yeah. And I get that. And marketing has to be active, but often where marketing can play, it's interesting. I've seen this with a couple of members of our community where you're an enterprise company and a few whales will change your year.
Mm-hmm.
The CMO and the CRO are working together and they have a war room for this one big client. And the CMO is so much better at constructing a story that will persuade over time and building up the resources and all the things that it takes to get 14 people at an organization to spend $100,000 or more. Often the marketer is the one who can make that happen. So, and that's through a number of things that are both short-term and long-term. Like if that marketer over a year period of time does analyst relations days and change the perspective and gets better reviews on Trust Radius and does these things, it makes the sales guy's job so much easier. Right. And then they can package and tell that story. And it's not a features-driven thing. Right.
Drew, what advice do you have for CMOs then today that are at PE-backed companies?
So, that there are a lot of folks that are really focused on this. I mean, Alan Gonsenhauser has written a lot, and that's what he does. And the PE firms that I've talked to is, look, you have to understand the basic thesis of the investor. They bought this company because they expected it could grow in this way. Like if they fix this thing or they merge two companies, they could, achieve profitable growth as a result of maybe they were going to introduce them to a new industry or something. Whatever that thesis is, the CMO has to internalize that to the point that everything that they do aligns with the thesis. And if the thesis is right and the CMO does and delivers against it, they'll, as one PE marketing guy said, they'll make a ton of money and they'll never have to work. They'll never be looking for a job because the PE firm will put them in the next company.
Mm-hmm.
I wish it was that simple.
Well,
it's, let's face it, it's rarely.
Right. And, I caution people when they start out to say, I'm going to drive pipeline right away. Many of the companies I work with, and that's because, they are scale-ups in some cases, but they're kind of on the trajectory.
Right.
Many of them did not look at some of their business segments. They did not really drill down on customer data, and they really don't have a great grasp for what the pain points are and how to trigger some of these great B2B segments that they're working in. So the risk in, just starting to churn stuff without learning is real, I think.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
And the pressure to do something quickly. So it's funny, we have this long list of quick quick wins checklist that we provide to our membership to help them buy the time to fix the real problems. If a company is not growing, it's probably not a marketing problem. It's probably a go-to-market problem. It's competitive. The pricing might be wrong, or the product isn't actually delivering the way it should, or there's a weakness at customer service and so forth. And the old saying, "There's nothing like great marketing to kill a bad product." Well, that's real. And I've seen it in B2B and B2C where, great marketing campaign created demand and then couldn't deliver. And the customers that were currently there were so unhappy. You didn't have the test, you create a downward spiral. So there are always things you can tweak, little things that could make a difference, 5%, 10%, just by in these days, doing a few things to help your website, be a little more generative AI, LLM friendly. Those are little things. They're not big things, but they might have an impact. And so you have that checklist and you do those things. But most likely, and I'd love to talk about what you're seeing and thinking about. Most B2B looks exactly the same. The playbooks are the same, the way they spend. And then every once in a while, you get something interesting that's different. And those are the brands that I love to talk about. And those are the CMOs I like to interview. I'm just curious if you have talked to some folks that are actually doing something different.
Thanks. You're flipping the switch on us. So I think this is a great topic. And my sense is the playbook is a good baseline. And to me, it's almost table stakes. And you have to do that, especially if companies are not doing sort of the basics. I think those are the basics, right? Do you have a segmentation to your customer base? Do you really understand what the pain points are? Are you communicating that on a regular basis? What's your top of the funnel look like? Are you setting yourself up for relevancy in this customer team, right? Because it's one thing to get down the funnel, but are you even in the relevant set for most of these folks? So there is some brand that comes into that as well. So I believe that that's table stakes. To me, I think solving the big problems. And sometimes what you're talking about to me is innovation. And I have seen big wins in the baseline playbook, okay, plus you're going to do something out of the box and you're going to do something a little innovative that the marketplace has not seen yet or done yet. And it may be an events that go with that, a different kind of event. It may be a different kind of, I've had wins on really impactful retention strategies that changed the game on this for my customer base. I've had new technologies that I worked really hard on with my product folks that we were going to deliver a meaningful tweak in this business so that it was marketing operational excellence, number one, and then a plus of innovation. That's how you get to growth, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I'm looking at the very few brands that say are community-led or customer-led. You go, wow, okay. What Sixth Sense has done with Coffee Talks and how they built that community is fascinating and effective in terms of perception of the brand. Customer-led, if you're a well-established brand, you have a lot of companies right now, those companies are the ones that have the opportunity because landing a new one is tough. Upsell, cross-sell, very, very different. Things like champion tracking is in terms of that, and there's a nitty-gritty thing. But I'm just looking for somebody who actually has a unique point of view.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Find one with a unique point of view.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
And
I think we're always searching for that, and it's hard, but that is really innovation at its best, right? You happen to find something that you really are truly unique at. It's already hard enough, I think, just to even put into play the playbook that is supposed to work. That job is already so hard in and of itself. So I think if you're a CMO that can do that, but also innovate on top of that, yeah, that's where you then rise to the top, right? You really are, top 1%. I think if you can pull that off.
So let's talk about, Alec, you and I were talking about this before, right? So what does it require of the CMO to do that well, right? Think about this. The skill set of the CMO has to be huge and very widespread. Like what do we expect CMOs to know today, right? I mean, if you look at a job description for some of these CMOs, like I want you to have SQL Server experience. You have to be an expert on the 11,000 plus MarTech tools that are out there today. You have to be a great brand communicator. You have to be a great storyteller. You have to be a great design driver. I mean, are we unrealistic expectations?
It's lunacy. I mean, if you were just saying, all right, what does a leader do? Let's just stop there. A leader, this is a chief, they set the vision, they build a team, and they allocate resources. They didn't say anything about expertise there. Vision, people, allocation, resource. And by the way, whatever task is given, if you don't have strong number twos, you're done. So we know that. But the third one of allocate resources is a very ripe area. I did this last night. I said, so how are you spending giving it on 100 being the total? And it was like 65 people or 60 people, 30% programs, 10 to 15% tech. And I said, oh, that's interesting. What would happen if you put 65% into programs? How would your reach change? How would you spend your money? What would you do? How would you staff it?
Yeah.
That's a radical way of thinking about allocation. But and again, if you're at a PE firm, they're telling you what your allocation is.
Mm-hmm.
They're not saying, oh, figure it out, whether it's better to be 50% people. No, we want your people to be 45%. So
that's so crazy to me. I had early in my career, I had somebody that said, what if you had this huge strategy built out and, the CEO or the board came into you or the PE firm came in and said, I approved all your data points on this. I understood the strategy, et cetera, et cetera. And then what if they changed it at the last minute? And I said, why would they want to do that? Maybe we've got the wrong fit, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons that right now is so difficult is we had Michael Watkins, the guy who he wrote The First 90 Days, a great business book, and he has a new book out on the 6 disciplines of strategy. And I think about strategy as something that you get into place and it's like a 3-year plan, right? He was talking about quarterly strategic reviews. And I thought, ooh, that's really hard. But if that is the speed of change in the way things think, then I guess the CMO is going to have to adjust. But the big boy table, if you will, is about strategy. And the closer that CMOs can get to be a respected member of the strategic team, the more likely, because then they can show this is how we're executing against the strategy that we came together. Go to market strategy, not marketing strategy, go to market. And so it's a different conversation than go fix pipe. And maybe you have to earn that, right? But man, if there's an opening, and AI seems to be one of those openings, the smart ones are really grabbing that and running right through it and saying, yep, because it's a strategic issue. It's not a tactical or a strategic opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great advice, right? See the opportunity or see that there's a moment here where there is something bigger that takes you beyond what you're typically kind of boxed into.
Right.
And if you can take that opportunity, then you can break out of that. That's a very interesting perspective and a way to look at AI that I think is bigger picture than just the tactics of AI. I think we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, you're in the bowels of AI. It's like, how do we make this work? How do we make this work?
Right.
But it is also the bigger picture of, it's like, hey, why is AI an opportunity to really change the landscape and be seen as a leader? That's a very interesting perspective and something I think we should think about a lot.
And let's expand that. And this is where it gets really, if you're the arts and crafts, God forbid, just the marketer person, you're looking at AI and you're saying, oh, it's great for content. It's speeding up. It's helping me, I'm producing more, or I'm producing it faster. And maybe I need less people. If that's where you're stopping, you've just missed the whole opportunity. Because there's so many different ways where marketing will transform workflow. Everything that you're doing repetitively, like we produce a podcast every week, sometimes twice a week. It used to take us 10 to 15 hours. Now it takes 2 because of a workflow. We analyze the whole workflow. So you look at all your workflows and you say, wow, these are repetitive. These involves 15 steps. What if I sat down with somebody who actually knew how to write code or a little bit of code and thought about how do we fix this workflow? Now, again, you're transforming how you work. And then there's just so much more from a strategic standpoint. And then I want to share one fun thing.
Good.
This is interesting. So if the problem is the relationship that you have with the CEO, the CFO, and the board, imagine you create a GPT for each of those folks and you train that GPT on that individual. And every time you have a conversation, you remember the conversation, you put it into that GPT. I recommend that you do this on your personal account, not the company account. And then you have your CEO and you say, I think my CEO is probably this personality, but let me tell you the behavior that I'm seeing all the time. Now tell me, let's role play. What questions are they going to ask? What's important to them? Let's do this. The ability to prepare and deal with and overcome these personalities and play the game. And you're going to be the only one in the C-suite doing this right now. That's number one. Number two is be prepared for your CFO to walk in and say, hey, I just asked ChatGPT how we could grow pipeline. and literally hands the 2-page report from ChatGPT. It says to do this, go do that. So you might as well do that exercise in advance. Yeah, I know. We did. We looked at it. Yeah, thanks. As opposed to being caught off guard, because that's what's happening right now.
I caught myself off guard, actually. I actually looked at a successful fractional CMO stint I did, 218% growth, 30% pipeline growth. And I was like, okay, I want to see if my plan was the same as ChatGPT's plan. So I did that with my digital twin. And it wasn't exactly the same plan. But I was shocked, right? That it was probably 65% of the plan. So that's an interesting, check that you're looking at. What if how much time would this have saved me? Would this have been a good investment for 65% throughput right away?
Yeah. I mean, I think that for every single thing that you do in life today, it is worth checking with the GPT. I just think the mistake that folks do is they take that and say, oh, okay, I'll do it. Because, it's the human in the loop that's going to make something different. But why not?
Yeah.
Particularly if you understand prompting and are doing a good job and giving it enough data and really being systematic about your prompts and tracking your prompts. And your use case was a great example of that because you did it, it worked. Now you can go and see what you got. So,
it was reverse engineering, right?
Exactly. So, and this is a new habit that all of us are having to train ourselves on.
Yeah. So let's talk about CMOs that are having fun and thriving right now. Tell me some stories about people who are winning and doing it well and all that. And by the way, you know what I would encourage CMOs to think about is we're all learning this together, right? It's not like you have to be the whole company expert. We're all learning it together. And by the way, other, angles of your company, if you have product managers in your company, they're all using it as well. So, by sharing some of that stuff with the company, I think could be a win for some CMOs.
So they're taking their moments of fun. I can't say that if I had a barometer and said 0 to 10, 10 being fun all the time, I don't know if many CMOs are getting to 5 right now.
Okay.
But where they are having it is they're trying to create protective zones and have the marketing department be fun, if you will.
Yeah.
That marketing is still a place where fun doesn't go to die. That's part one. And you see that joy whenever there's a post on LinkedIn and the folks said, I got my team together physically. We were all at an event. We got our customers together and we shared look what we're doing. And I think the hard part if marketing gets small, you don't feel like you're part of something big. And I think CMOs are challenged when they created demand gen and brand and divide the groups as they do. It's like, you're doing something that drives business. You're doing something that nobody really believes in. All marketing drives demand. So let's not look at our departments that way. But so I think like one of my favorites in this, so Kelly Hopping, the CMO of Demand Base, and she's been on the show and talked about this publicly, so I'm not sharing. She talks about our role is to make sales love us. And I think that's it. So it's like literally we have a mission statement as a marketing team. And how do we make sales love us? Well, you think about it, if we do marketing that drives pipe, that's good. If we create sales enablement programs that help them sell better, that's good. If we know our customers and we go in with them and go on sales calls, those are all ways. And I think by having that kind of, there's a sense of control. We know what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And again, that's set the vision. And it's more fun. I'm not going to use it as lower, small f fun.
Maybe the other key here too is how often do you find is CMO and CRO are peers, or how often do you find where a CRO actually owns marketing?
Oh God. Okay. So if you said to me, should a CMO report to a CRO? I'll say no. Easy answer. Because most CROs that have that have never spent any time in marketing. So they're just looking at marketing as a cost. It's rare that you have a CRO who has, because it's really the old COO job. It's in theory, that role was someone who manages marketing, sales, customer success, and they have an overview of the thing. I get that job. But when you just have a CRO with no marketing experience, now I know a CRO who came from marketing, and they have a marketing person and a salesperson reporting to them. It's working out great. So it's all about the experience level. They also had sales experience, so they can do it. Mm-hmm. The more common structure is CMO, CRO, right? Mm-hmm. Reporting into the CEO or reporting into a COO. Mm-hmm. And I would say there isn't a member of our community who doesn't strive to be bonded with their CRO. Mm-hmm. And, they present together. They have shared metrics. There aren't marketing metrics. And, that's why you hear so many people saying, no more MQLs. We're not talking about that. We care about pipeline. We care about cost per acquisition. We care about the things that sales cares about and so forth. And that's good. I still think that if that's it, you're just on this short-term lagging indicator thing. You're not thinking about the sort of bigger things. So, look, you can never go wrong being bonded with your other members of the C-suite. And so knock yourself out. But recognize the difference between marketing and sales, and the purview is different.
Yeah. Isn't that, I feel like that's the two chief level roles, though, CMO and CRO, are unlike other C-level roles, though, in that what you just said, right? Is that because what other chief roles really do operate so closely and intertwined together? It seems like that is a unique aspect. Yeah, if we can get to that.
No, it's true. And they go down together, or a new CRO comes in and we got to get rid of the CMO, or the CMO comes in and the CRO is no good, whatever. Yeah. There's probably as much turnover at the CRO level, again, when they're parallel.
Yeah.
Particularly when the economy is uncertain, like we're facing now. Let's blame the sales guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, we used to call that line employees, right? Line employees are on the line for the number, right? So it's great to be a CFO. They have to do projections, and if the guidance isn't correct, it's bad too. Blah blah blah. But the people who are on the line for performance, I always like to elevate that team a little bit amongst the eyes of the business because, let's face it, right? I mean, 9 out of 10 times, if there's questions, it's going to those two.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And again, I think CMOs can get ahead of that, just like CROs. Again, they present. There's no such thing. If sales aren't doing well, marketing should be pretty unhappy and working to solve it and recognize that this is on them too.
Yeah. Totally
Yeah, in
agree with
most
that.
companies, it's SG&A, right? Sales and marketing are together in the same line item, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, right. And again, going back to the PE firm, they will tell you what that percentage should be.
yeah.
25%.
Right.
Period. That's a and 7% of that should be marketing. Next.
What is the average?
But that's one specific very large PE firm. It's like 25% is sales and marketing combined spend. 7% of that should be marketing.
Of
Oh,
gross revenue.
7% of the 25% should be marketing. So, okay.
So 7% and 18%
18.
equals
Sorry.
25.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
All right. That's okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. I mean, that's
Boy, I could, I'll counter that on a brand new company or a new market entry, and there's
Yeah.
a whole host of
It's good
other.
to know what an average is.
And it's silly because if you're going at net new, often that number could be 50%
Yeah.
Yeah.
marketing.
Right. Yeah.
So it's,
I do a lot of business in healthcare, and it's like across the board, right? Drugs, devices, totally a different spend, benchmark. But
right.
Um,
I mean, and one of the things we haven't really talked about, which is this other side of, so, we have all these metrics that show sort of pipeline and, that things, but the bigger issue is, are you making progress against your target audience, right? And very few brands actually have any kind of sophisticated brand tracking because they don't want to spend the money on that. Well, there's a lot of surrogate metrics for brand health today. And that part of the story, and again, it's not about the exact number it's about, are you making progress over time? Because eventually you'll get the anecdote where a CEO of a company said, yeah, I heard of you guys. I saw your presentation at XYZ company, right? And then suddenly everybody goes, oh my God, marketing works because an anecdote. But you have to have this other thing. And I don't think enough CMOs argue for, look, our dashboard can't only be, if that's all we're talking about, you just need a VP of demand, I'll go. Right? And that's, by the way, happened a lot this last 2 years.
Okay, wait. So you tease that a little bit. What are some of these surrogate measures? What have you seen other people using?
So there are, and we're working on a model right now that tracks this, and we're not ready to go public with it, but there are, sort of old school stuff like share of voice that you can get from a Meltwater or something like that, share of impressions. But there's social impressions, there's website traffic. And I know those all sound like vanity metrics, but there's time on website, there's certain key leading indicators of brand health. There's booth traffic or lack of booth traffic. There's all sorts of ways of looking at, are we engaging more members of our audience tomorrow than we did yesterday? Are we, and in a month? And you can add it up, and you can weight them any way you want. I talk about this in my book in chapter 10 of Renegade Marketing, and I provide you, again, sort of these buckets where you can take these numbers and then you can put in any kind of percentage allocation, but all you need is 5 of those. And you weight them up to 100 and you track it over time and you can show progress. And I have seen brands that have actually been able to, when they do that, and it's like they cut PR, and guess what? The brand health number went down 6 months later, and they went, oh, we better add it back. But if you don't have that in place, you're living and dying by form fills and stuff, which is garbage.
Right. I'm telling you, you can't grow your way to operational efficiency if you want really interesting metrics. But you're exactly right on the brand side. And we've heard this too, right? Especially now with brand authority coming out. right? Brand authority is going to be one of those ways that the AI is going to pick up your brand relevance.
Right.
And if you're not in, that top overview section when you're in Google, if you're not in ChatGPT's answer or Copilots, this is going to cost you in the future. So you better rethink things like PR. But I would love some metric that said, yes, this brand health or brand relevance, whatever you say, that you could prove to the board. Wouldn't that be nice?
So, and I think I forgot a bunch of areas where that's really important. It's where sort of recommendations and referrals are another way. So like if you go look at your trust radiusing and you have more recommendations this month than you did last month, that's progress. If you look at employee survey and you ask them the question, not likelihood to recommend working, but are you proud to work here?
Yeah.
That pride in workplace is a reflection of how they feel about the brand. Right. And so you can add that. So if you have an employee sort of health and a customer health, and then prospects in terms of the noise that you're making in the industry. And then again, you look at all those up and are we trending up or are we trending down?
Yeah.
And you can always see after budget cut, you're going to be trending down. And it's important to be able to show that because that impact is going to come into pipeline 12 months later. But if you don't have that, again, you're living and dying by the metrics that you're basically sales metrics. And that's a problem because you got to be thinking 18 to 36 months out as a chief marketing officer.
Drew Neisser, this has been a terrific conversation, a lot of wonderful perspective. And I think at a level also that we often don't get, you can really speak at this very general level, having spoken to so many CMOs. So you can speak to some of these broad trends that we all feel. And I think a lot of us probably wonders like, gosh, am I the only one? And this is comforting to know that it's not just me, right?
It is not, come in from the cold. It is.
Right.
It is, it's cold for everybody out there.
Right. Yeah.
If people want to get a hold of you, where could we go?
LinkedIn is, it's Drew Neisser on LinkedIn, and that's the easiest. Or they can go to CMOHuddles.com and find me there. And we still run RenegadeMarketing.com is a media website with lots of information for senior marketers.
Yep. And I should point out, I think that part of your Huddles program also is helping CMOs that are looking for their next role as well.
It's
so
true.
That's
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, we have something called the transition team.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a big one as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We turn the tables on you. You're normally the one asking the questions. You got to be the one answering. So I hope it was still fun.
Oh, it was. It's a real treat to not be. But I did get a question or two in on you.
You did. You couldn't resist. So
thank you again. Thank you again for doing your show. It's so important and valuable. So
I hope this was a piece of fun for us today.
That's right. There we go. That was a good close. Thanks, Barb. Thanks, Drew.